There is a cellar under my grandparents' house in the foothills south of Munich that has not seen a power outage matter in over 70 years. Not because the lights never went out. They went out plenty of times, in storms, in the hard winters after the war, in the years when nobody in our village had much of anything. The lights went out and nobody in that house even got up to check a candle drawer, because the food downstairs did not need electricity to stay good. 90 days of meals, sitting in jars and sacks and hanging from hooks, built by hand, paid for once and good for an entire season. No subscription, no delivery truck, no bill. My name is Martin Hofer. I grew up on a small farm in the foothills south of Munich, in Bavaria, and the cellar I am talking about belonged to my grandmother Rosina. She fed 8 people out of that room, every single day, for years at a stretch, without ever once driving to a supermarket, because in her time and in her village, there was no supermarket to drive to. Today, I want to walk you through exactly what she kept down there, how she built it up over a single season, and why a family today, in a regular house with a regular basement, could still do almost all of it. By the end of this, you will understand why your grocery bill is not actually about food. It is about convenience you are paying for, whether you want it or not. And I am going to show you the part that should bother you a little, which is that none of what my grandmother knew has disappeared. It has just been allowed to go quiet. Stay with me, because this one changes how you look at your own kitchen. Let me start with the thing most people get backwards. They think a pantry like my grandmother's was about hardship, about making do, about poverty, about people who had no choice. That is not what it was. It was about timing. My grandmother did not preserve food because she was poor. She preserved food because she understood something that almost nobody understands today, which is that food has a season. And if you work with the season instead of against it, you only have to do the hard work once a year instead of 52 times a year. Think about how you eat right now. You go to the store every week, sometimes twice a week, and you buy small amounts of things that were grown somewhere far away, picked early, shipped cold, and sold to you at a price that covers the truck, the warehouse, the lighting in the store, and the profit of 3 or 4 companies standing between you and the farmer. Every single week, that whole chain has to work perfectly, or your kitchen is empty. My grandmother's pantry worked differently. In late summer and into the autumn, the work was hard. I will not lie to you about that, but it was concentrated. A few weeks of real effort, and then the rest of the year, the cellar simply fed the family. The system did the work. Not her, not every day. The system. So let me take you through what was actually down there, room by room almost, because it was not one trick. It was several methods working together. The same way a roof is not one shingle but many shingles overlapping so that no single one of them has to do all the work on its own. The first thing you noticed walking down those stone steps was the smell of onions and the cool, earthy air, maybe 50 degrees Fahrenheit even in August. That coolness was not an accident. My grandfather built that cellar into the hillside on purpose, half dug into the earth with thick stone walls so that the ground itself kept the temperature steady through every season. No machine, no compressor, just the natural insulation of the earth doing what a refrigerator does, for free, forever. He built it in 1951, and it has never once needed a repairman, never once needed a part replaced, never once needed anyone but my grandfather and a shovel. Along one wall stood the root vegetables, set into bins of slightly damp sand. Carrots, potatoes, beets, turnips, parsnips. Buried in sand like that, a carrot that would go soft and rubbery in your refrigerator crisper in 2 weeks would stay firm and sweet for 4 or 5 months. The sand keeps just enough moisture against the skin to stop the vegetable from drying out, but not so much that it rots. My grandmother dug those bins out every fall from the same patch of riverbank sand, and every spring there were still carrots in there. A little less crisp, but perfectly good. Still good enough for a soup, still good enough for a stew. Next to the bins were the cabbages, hung upside down by their roots from the ceiling beams, or set whole on a shelf. A whole cabbage, untouched, kept in that cool, dark room, will last most of the winter without any treatment at all. And the cabbage that was cut, she turned into sauerkraut, packed tight into stone crocks with salt, weighted down under a plate and a stone, left to ferment on its own for weeks. That fermentation is not some folk trick. It is real chemistry, salt drawing water out of the cabbage, the right bacteria thriving in that salty brine while the bad bacteria cannot survive it. The result keeps for the better part of a year, and it is full of vitamin C, which mattered a great deal in a winter with no fresh fruit coming in from anywhere, no oranges on a truck, no lemons in a crate. Then there were the shelves of jars, rows and rows of them, glass lids sealed tight, holding everything that grew in the garden in summer: tomatoes, green beans, plums, cherries, applesauce, pickled cucumbers. The principle is the same one your grandmother probably used too, if you go back far enough. You cook the food, you pack it hot into a clean jar, you seal it while it is hot, and as it cools, the lid pulls down tight and locks out the air. No air, no spoilage. A jar of tomatoes put up in August was just as good in February as the day it was canned, sometimes better, because the flavors had time to deepen and settle. Hanging from the ceiling beams, away from the vegetables, were the cured meats. This was my grandfather's part of the work more than my grandmother's. Every autumn after the harvest was in, they slaughtered a pig, the way nearly every household in our village did, and almost nothing of that animal went to waste. The hams were rubbed with salt and left to cure for weeks in a cool, dark corner of that same cellar, the salt pulling the moisture out of the meat so that bacteria had nothing to live on. After the salt cure came the smokehouse, which still stands today at the edge of our orchard, a small, dark wooden building where those hams hung over a slow, smoldering fire of beechwood for days. The smoke dries the meat further and lays down a coating that keeps it safe, and it gives that deep flavor that no factory ham wrapped in plastic ever comes close to. A properly salted, properly smoked ham, hung in a cool cellar, will keep for the better part of a year. Sausages were made the same week, some smoked the same way, some packed into jars and preserved in their own fat, which the old cooks called Schmalz, a method that seals meat completely away from air under a layer of hardened lard. You scoop out a piece when you want it, and what is left under the fat stays just as protected as before, sealed tight by nothing more than cooled fat. Eggs got their own treatment, too, because hens lay heavily in spring and summer and almost stop in the dead of winter. My grandmother kept a crock of what she called water glass, a solution of sodium silicate mixed with water, and she lowered fresh eggs into it whole, shell and all, in the months when the hens were laying plenty. That solution coats the shell and seals the tiny pores in it, the same pores that let bacteria in and let the egg dry out over time. An egg kept that way stayed good for 8 months, sometimes longer, so that even in February when the hens were barely laying, there were still eggs for baking and for breakfast, still eggs for the children before school. And then, against the far wall, stood the sacks. Flour, dried beans, dried peas, oats, and grain for the chickens and the pigs. Dry goods like that, kept off the floor, kept dry and cool and away from light, simply do not spoil the way fresh food does. That is the whole secret of the dry goods wall. Water is what bacteria need to live, and grain with the water taken out of it through proper drying just sits there, patient, for a year or more, waiting to become bread, waiting to become porridge on a cold morning. Now, here is what I want you to really sit with for a moment, because this is where it stops being a nice story about the old country and starts being something you can actually use. A family today spends on average somewhere around $800 to $1,000 a month on groceries. That number has gone up sharply in just the last few years, and it keeps climbing every season. Multiply that out across a year, and you are looking at $10,000 or $11,000 flowing out of a household every single year, forever, with no end to it, because the moment you stop paying, the cupboard is bare within a week, sometimes within days. My grandmother's pantry was the opposite of that. The upfront work, the slaughtering, the canning, the smoking, Cost a season of labor and the price of salt, jars, and a bit of sodium silicate for the eggs. After that, for 90 days or more, sometimes through an entire winter, very little additional money left the house for food. The garden had already been paid for in sweat back in May. The pig had already been raised on scraps and pasture. The cellar simply released what had already been earned, a little every day, with no recurring charge at all, no monthly invoice, no price that creeps up every January. That is the real difference between her kitchen and yours. Your kitchen is rented, paid for week by week, dependent on the truck arriving on schedule. Hers was owned outright, built once, and it answered to nobody. I am not telling you to go slaughter a pig this weekend. I know most people listening to this live nowhere near a farm, and that is fine. But I want you to look at your own basement, or even just a cool closet, and ask yourself honestly, what is stopping you from doing even a third of what I just described? A few crocks of sauerkraut cost almost nothing and take an afternoon. A shelf of canned tomatoes from a summer farmer's market, put up properly, will sit safely through the winter. A simple root vegetable bin with damp sand in a cool corner of a basement will keep carrots and potatoes for months, past what your refrigerator manages. None of this requires land. It requires a weekend, some jars, some salt, and the willingness to do work once instead of paying for convenience every single week for the rest of your life. The reason almost nobody does this anymore is not that it stopped working. It works exactly as well today as it did in my grandmother's kitchen, exactly as well as it worked for her mother before her. The reason is that there is no company on earth that profits from you canning your own tomatoes. There is no truck, no warehouse, no advertising budget behind a jar you sealed yourself at your own kitchen table. The entire modern food system depends on you needing it every week, forever, with no end date. A full pantry, built once a year, is the one thing that quietly removes you from that arrangement and hands the control back to you. So, here is what I want you to try. Pick one single method from everything I just described. Maybe it is a crock of sauerkraut. Maybe it is a bin of sand-packed carrots in your basement. Maybe it is simply canning a few jars of tomato sauce the next time they are cheap at the market. Start with one. Do it once, properly, and watch how long it actually lasts compared to what you buy at the store week after week. Tell me in the comments which one you are going to try first, and tell me what part of your own family's old kitchen knowledge you still remember, because those memories from your own grandparents are exactly the kind of thing I want to keep alive on this channel. I read every single comment, every one of them, and they are the reason I keep making these. Next time, I want to show you the exact way my grandfather built that root cellar into the hillside, the slope, the stone, the placement, so that it has held a steady temperature for over 70 years with no machine ever touching it. It is the foundation that makes everything else in this video possible, and it is simpler to build than you think, simpler than most people would ever guess looking at it. Until then, fill one jar, start one crock, and remember that the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.